Welcome to the Villanova University Center for Irish Studies podcast. My name is Joseph Lennon, and I am the Emily C. Riley Director of the Center and host of this podcast series. Villanova's connections to Ireland extend back to its founding and continue to this day. We offer a major and a minor in Irish Studies and have 6 study abroad programs to Ireland. We teach in 8 disciplines and host distinguished visitors to campus. This podcast aims to share some of our conversations and expand the bounds of our community beyond campus. Thank you, and feel free to share. Today we are lucky to have Emilie Pine back on campus. Emilie is professor of modern drama in the School of English, Drama and Film at University College Dublin. Has published as an academic and as a creative writer. Her most recent academic book, The Politics of Irish Memory, Performing Remembrance in Contemporary Irish Culture, came out in 2011, but she became known to a much wider audience with the publication of Notes to Self, a collection of personal essays which in 2018 won the Irish Book of the Year award. She has written and collaborated for the theater and published a novel, Ruth and Pen, which in 2023 won the Kate O'Brien First Novel Award. At present, she is on campus at Villanova as the 2024 Charles A. Heimbold Jr. Chair of Irish Studies. She has met and taught innumerable students on campus and has just completed maybe a draft of her next essay collection. So welcome, Emilie.
Thank you so much for a gorgeous welcome, Joseph.
Quite all right. And joining us also today is a colleague from the English department. Dr. Adrienne Perry is a prose writer who teaches courses on creative writing, creative nonfiction, and editing and publishing, among other topics. And we're very fortunate to have her. And we've also invited one of our students, Charlotte Ralston, is a senior English major with a minor in Irish Studies, who also serves as an assistant to the director at Villanova's Writing Center. So today we're going to have a conversation. So welcome.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
We're going to talk a little bit about your writing, a lot about your writing maybe, but I wanted to first start to ask, what have you been talking with the students about here on campus? What's been the conversation, or has there been many?
There have been many, and one of the treats of getting to go to a new university is to just see things from a slightly different perspective, like outside of our own small boxes, Our boxes are where we live and they're very comfortable, but it's nice to get out of them every so often. And so, I mean, as you said in your introduction, I started out as an academic with a very traditional academic career. And then in 2016-17, I started writing differently. And that was when the book was published in 2018 as a non-academic book. And then I wrote a novel as well. And so I'm really trying to think more now about creative practice and what happens when we turn up at the page, and why, in fact, do we need to turn up at the page at all? Like, what is it that we're trying to communicate? And so one of the joys of being here in Villanova has been having conversations with students and asking them this question and thinking about their practice. And we've been talking about, like, okay, what's hard? Like, when we're writing for ourselves, what's hard when we're writing for other people? What's flow? What does flow mean to us? And what's getting feedback like? And people have been sharing, different ways of getting feedback. In Adrienne's class, we talked about how to kind of write in a sustainable way. Like, how do we show care for ourselves when we're writing? Because it can be really hard. So it's just, I'm really thinking about writing as a process and not just as an object or a product.
Right. Adrienne, I mean, do you talk about flow in your class, in your classes?
I don't think we have really talked about flow, but we do talk about what it means to see ourselves as artists and as writers, and is that something not just what I'm doing for an assignment, but how that's a kind of disposition toward life, a kind of orientation toward life. And I think it has something to do with flow because it's about how we step into the stream of creating, of living. And I think for many of us, I don't know what your experience is, Charlotte, but I feel like for me, I access flow states often through reading. And I think a lot of people are drawn to creative writing in part because they have stories they want to tell and they've had the experience of entering a kind of flow as readers. And so there's a kind of magic there, a sort of intimacy a captivation. And so, though we don't talk about it expressly, I feel like we've talked about maybe different nodes or points related to it. And I definitely think it's something that I feel like I experience it. I feel it often in these moments in workshop where you can just feel that people are really pulling oars at the same rate. So I don't know. And it doesn't even have to just be our class, but I wonder what you think about that.
Yeah, I agree. And I think too, there's this desire when you're reading these short stories that we've been reading in class, there's a desire to be able to create that kind of flow that you're getting as a reader for someone else, for your own reader. And so I do think in workshop, we've really been working to try and access that and to tell each other what works, what isn't as successful, to be able to give each other that experience of being able to create the flow as well as experience it.
This is one of the things that I love about creative writing classes, right? Because it can feel like such a solitary experience a lot of time at the desk. But that example that you just gave was about writing as a conversation, right? And how to say, oh, how do we give it to each other? I think writing is often seen as a selfish task, but actually it can be a generous thing too.
Absolutely.
I'm going to let you ask a question in a second, but I just wanted to put a bow on this. Yesterday, when I saw you, you said, if you don't mind me quoting you a little bit, that you had been writing furiously and you felt a little feral because you had been going for days and writing. And I wonder, I mean, we go through these bursts of productivity and creativity also. So anyway, I just put that out there. Is this typical to your writing practice to get into?
So I don't want to live there permanently. And I could feel the finish line coming.
Right.
And
Sure.
so I would have finished. Yeah, I did. The thing that I told you was I did a crazy day on Monday, right? When and also one of the joys of this chair position is that I get to be away from the rest of my life. And again, I would only want that temporarily, but it's an amazing privilege to not have to worry about other family things and commitments and stuff. And it's something that we don't often get, right? Writing often comes at the end of our to-do list rather. And at the moment, it's at the top of mine. And so I was like, right, okay, I'm going to spend this crazy day on Monday writing until, 10 o'clock at night, which would not be my norm. Because I also knew then I was going to be stopping. So, but it's Friday now and I'm still exhausted and I'm just recognizing the cost of that, So flow is this amazing state, but also it can be very taxing. So it's just trying to get to the end of something, and there's that glimmer on the horizon, and there's almost that thing that happens to me anyway, where it's like I can almost touch it, and I just want to get there. And then I stop and I realized I was never going to get but the oasis has disappeared. It was just a mirage after all, but it's fun while you're doing it.
Indeed. So can I ask what has been a favorite or an interesting part of engaging with a reading of Emilie Pine? And did you
pretend I'm not here?
Charlotte, do you want to start or?
Sure. I mean, and this kind of goes into a question that I have for you, if that's okay.
Great.
So the first time that I read Notes to Self, I was taking actually Dr. Jenny Joyce's class 2 years ago, 2.5 almost, I think. And then to come back and revisit 2 years later, and it's only been 2 years, but still I feel in a very different point in my life. I have a different relationship now to the writing, and while it really touched me at the time in a very raw way, now I feel a little bit more detached from some of the, removed through time from some of the things that I really connected to in this that were almost like a little bit intense to read. And so I was wondering kind of what that's like to look back on the stories that you've already written, and how your relationship to them kind of changes once they go onto the page and have been on the page.
So it is 6 years now since I finished it. And so I do have a little of that critical distance that I think you're talking about. And I would say exactly the same kind of pattern, right? You're as a reader, but me as a writer, like away from the raw identification with it. And then now I'm like, now I try to see it almost as a piece of writing. The thing that I think about now is that it was very empowering for me to put it down on the page and to tell that story, and that there is a special gift given to the writer during the process of writing, which is an engagement with your own sense of creativity. And then, it was published, and the real thing that I learned is that when other people read it, they had their own takes on it and would tell me their stories, which was,
And
again...
maybe we should just say what the book is about a little bit.
Oh, yeah.
Just so for people who haven't heard it.
So Notes to Self is a collection of 6 essays, and they're about each essay is about a different aspect of my life. And the first essay is about my father, who is still alive. That's the happy ending of that story. But in 2013 went into liver failure, and he had been an alcoholic all my life. And so it was a kind of story I had been telling to myself for a very long time, and it came to this kind of crisis point when he went into intensive care. And he has been sober since and is alive as a result, and we got given an extra 11 years that we never thought we would have with him. So the book is really about trying to come to terms with difficult or painful things that happen, but also kind of trying to set them... I think what I would do now if I were writing, try to set things in context. Like, one of the things I always say to people about Notes is that it's about painful things, but I was not traumatized while I was writing it, right? And I think that's a really important point to make, that like it's written from the perspective of someone who is happy, someone
at
who
a bit
is
of a remove,
secure in their life, someone who has got a lot of stability that I've worked to build. And I say that because I think a lot of memoir writing can sometimes feel a little bit dangerous, emotionally dangerous. So yeah.
My thought was in how this has changed over time, your take on it, and Charlotte's take as well. Are you appreciating it more in terms of the craft of what you're telling, but at the same time, these are very difficult things that you've written about, right? And so the perspective that you gain can help, I think, readers get a better take on the issue, but also are we appreciating the art of it more?
Sorry, I'm not sure who that's the question for, so
I
I'm going to speak and then you will have time to think about what to say. But I think the art of it is really important, because Notes to Self is by no means my entire life, but what I tried to do was be as open and honest as I could about the parts of my life I was telling or was sharing. And people afterwards, sometimes people would say, oh, it was like reading your diary. And I felt like saying, no. It's not. It's a highly crafted piece of work. And I think that act of mediation is really important to stress, both as a writer, but also as a reader. And one of the things I noticed when people who had read it said to me, oh, this happened to me too, and they would describe their life, and I would think, it's actually not what happened to me, and it's not what's in the book. And I really realized how creative reading is. The reading process is a process of ownership and remaking the story. And I have a fundamentally different understanding of reading, and also weirdly of writing. So I feel like I put it out in the world. It doesn't really belong to me anymore. The experience belongs to me. I don't mean that as a process of alienation. I mean that as a process of recognizing that creativity out in the world is owned by the people who are the audience, right? Who are now making it meaningful in response to their own lives. But I had an extraordinary experience once with somebody who came to me, and not just one person, but several people who said to me that there is a problem with addiction in their families. And instead of having a conversation about the addiction within their own families, they gave copies of my book to certain family members and then had a conversation about Emily and Emily's dad, right? Where as a way of
that's what art can do that.
It really can, I
give
think.
Us that distance.
Well, do you want to answer, or I can dive in? What do you think, Charlotte?
Sure. I think that's really interesting to hear too, because I feel like maybe I'm a little bit on the opposite side of that, where I was reading it and kind of experiencing some similar things that were going on. And so I was in that position of kind of reading your story as mine 2 years ago. And now I do think I can appreciate the craft much more, because now it's a book that I'm reading. It's not the life that I'm perceiving myself as living. And I can also appreciate the differences in the stories because it's again not so close anymore.
That's really interesting. Do you know that is the dividend of rereading something, isn't it?
Exactly.
Like, and your analytic brain coming to the fore, you know? Yeah.
But, and just that, what you said, reading your story as my own, I mean, it's a remarkable testament for what literature and what reading can do, right? That we make all these personal connections to it, right? And I know Emily now for years, but I read it and I'm like, that's not Emily, that's Emily. Oh, that's Emily. Wow. Oh, and then I think that's like me. Oh, that's like my story. You know, and you know, so
I have a number of different thoughts that are coming to me. One of the things that comes up from this last part of conversation or bit of conversation is in my editing and publishing class, we read this brief piece by Rudine Sims Bishops, and she talks about, it's about like multiculturalism and literacy, and part of this essay is where she's talking about the lack of characters of color in children's literature and what that means. But anyway, she says that sometimes we look at a piece, we read something and it's a mirror, and that's important. Sometimes we have it, we'll see a mirror in it. Sometimes that literature will be, or that story will be like a window where we can see part of ourselves reflected, but we can also see to some outside world. And then there are the sliding glass doors where we can move into a completely different space. Often it's a space that's deeply empathetic, that we figure out something about ourselves and the world, but we kind of have to leave our own kind of safe, what can feel sort of validating. And I think it also speaks to what you were saying about the importance of rereading, because perhaps maybe it was a mirror. Now that book is a window, you know, Notes to Self is a window. Maybe for someone else, it's a sliding glass door. But I think it also helps articulate how the reading of a book, when we think that it's a mirror, but that's us that we're seeing, not necessarily, but especially in nonfiction, that persona, that's the author. And when so much is disclosed, I think we feel very close to authors and we feel like a sense of care and ownership. But I'll just back up to say
that was wonderfully put, by the way.
Oh, hey.
Thank you.
Well, thanks. I wouldn't have said it today unless I had this occasion to speak with you. I am so happy to have met this book. You know, I'm happy to meet you too. But
the book is way better.
I don't know. You know, my experience of reading it, I think I might be like a number of your readers who feel that sense of both mirroring and window. But I actually feel like as a writer, it's a bit of a sliding glass door for me in the sense that, and I can also feel, and it's strange to say this to the author of this book, but I felt resistant to it because there were places I did not want to go. But one of the things that this book is a teacher for me. And I am coming to appreciate things about my own work. Stories are coming to me. Things are happening in my own writing. And I think this book has also converged with a number of other resources. So, you know, we talked, there was an earthquake today, there's an eclipse, and also I'm getting all the books I need, you know, for my rucksack to do the things I need to do. Yeah. And so I think I feel like I'm learning a lot about writing through this book and doing the work that we talked about this in class too. Like, what is the work you feel like you really isn't really important to you? What are the things you really need to say? And I think, you know, a book like this also acknowledges this was what was important for me to say then. You know, like your new project, this is what it's important for you to say now. And I think so seeing that done and modeled, I think this book is an important guide for me, or like a fellow traveler. And I'm going to get to a question I have for you in a second, because it's helping me see my future in writing. I don't know what that means in terms of a product.
Right.
I know what it means in terms of like what I would do, possibilities. And some of it has to do with, you know, work with memory and how nonfiction is for me such a teacher. And just wait, like be patient, because it will come in layers and you'll remember things. But so I feel like this book has arrived for me at the perfect time, and is a book that is helping me do will help me do the work that I want to do. And so I wondered if there are books that you feel that way about, that maybe arrived in your life for the particular authors. I feel like they're often folks who it's like, you know what, I don't write like them necessarily, but their work is part of what makes my work possible, or showed me a sort of possible future. So
yeah, absolutely. I also think, and in what you just said, things arrive at the time you need them. I also think we discover them at the time. Like they could be there,
right,
and we wouldn't see them, right? Because it's not. So I think we go out, and I think it's a very active process, right? We go out and find the thing that we need in the moment that we need it as writers.
I like that.
And what amazes me about that process, just to talk about it in an abstract form for a moment, is that sometimes I'm really inspired by something, and I'm like, oh, that's it. That's the way. That's the path. That's the way through. That's the thing. And then I pull out my notebook, or I pull out my laptop, and I'm like typing. I'm like, okay, well, I'm just going to go back to the original, the thing that inspired me so much, and I'm going to copy what they said, right? Let's be honest about this. Let's be honest about plagiarism.
That's funny.
And I go to it, and I think, oh. And I can't find it. I can't find the magic sentence. Yeah. I can't find the paragraph, because it was the experience. And it's actually not about copying the words that they put on the page, or even, it was the feeling that was generated by where I was in that moment, and what they were modeling, right?
I have
it's not a literal
notebooks filled with quotes and songs, quotes and lines from poems, and I go back and look at it and say, how do these relate?
Why did I write that
what
down?
What was the track here?
But I will give a very specific example, which was I was stuck on how to, the most meta of the essays is about me being a teenager, and I was really stuck on how to write it. I was really stuck on how to write it because it was really difficult to write about experiences of violence and to go back. And also it was not the furthest away in terms of my memory, but in terms of the detail of it, I really wanted to get it right. And so I was, I wrote the first version of it, and my partner, who's a brilliant editor, and actually
the great Ronan Kelly.
The great Ronan Kelly. He's a writer himself. Check out Ronan Kelly's book. Follow this link. But he said, you're kind of, you got this jokey tone to it, because I was trying to keep myself safe, and he said, this is really serious, so you need to write it seriously. But every time I wrote it seriously, it felt really just very depressing, but also too confrontational or upfront. And so I was reading Adrienne Rich's essay, Split at the Root, one day about kind of her Jewish identity and trying to find a way to write about it. And what she wrote was, I sit at my desk and I look out the window and I'm like, okay, well, that's really good. So I'm in my essay, I'm like, well, I'm sitting at my desk and I'm looking at my notebook, because that's fundamentally different from looking out the window. But it was the way she wrote about the process of writing, and her how unsure she was about it. Like, she acknowledged it. She didn't hide it. She didn't feel the need to come across as this expert. Instead, she was acknowledging just the nuance of ambiguity and unknowing. And I thought it was the strongest thing I'd ever read. And I was like, okay, if there's something to aspire to here, it's that. She's an amazing writer.
Just 2 seconds. I once was fortunate to drive her a few hours in a car, and we talked about
no way.
And I went in thinking she is going to be pessimistic. Because it was the Iran-Iraq war. There was, and I said, this is going to be a very downer conversation. She was the most optimistic person I had met in years. Amazing. And I left that conversation feeling so buoyant. And so anyway. She was an amazing person for perceiving things honestly and then helping us bend to a new understanding. But I think you're doing that same work.
I would love to move more in that direction. I'm really inspired by people who manage to I was reading Judith Butler's new work, and Who's Afraid of Gender? And in it they talk about the need for a counter-imaginary. And I think that that's such a powerful way of putting it. Instead of saying, they say, what one of the things we could do is demonstrate a history of gender, or one of the things we could do is come up with a new theory of gender. But actually what they're arguing for is a counter vision. And I think that's such a powerful way of incorporating a bit of optimism, not just fighting the right wing or fighting the backlash or whatever, but instead saying, okay, this is who we want to be. So I would, that's very inspiring.
I was going to ask a question about Ruth and Penn,
Sure.
but
I've not read it yet.
so well, let me
Not a test.
No, it's not a test.
Yeah.
No. But I just wanted to ask, in terms of your
Full disclosure.
how fair enough, in terms of writing about different voices that are not yours, but have maybe shades of your experience, and writing fiction as opposed to writing nonfiction. Because it's a wonderful book with story of two very different women who sort of connect, and one, I don't want to give too much away, but one has a love interest, and the other is an older woman who has some sort of wisdom on things. And
I think of it the other way around. That's really funny to hear you describe it, because I think of Penn, who's 16.
Well, she has
a lot more wisdom, right? Because she's had to work so much harder for it. Yeah, sorry, I interrupted your question.
No, it's
Joseph.
great.
You never got to the
No, but the
question
question
either.
just is about telling stories or telling truths as from your own experience. I'm not a fiction writer, so I just put it out. Is there a switch that you throw in your head and you say, okay, now I'm going to fabulize, or what is?
Now I'm going to pretend to be making stuff up. No, I suppose for me, I actually see a really strong consistency between the books. In thinking about, okay, what is the inner voice that we don't let out very often. And when I started writing Ruth and Penn, there was kind of a big boom in reviews of books where the reviewers claimed the female characters were unlikable, and it wasn't just books, it was plays and all the rest as well, and TV shows and things, and the unlikable woman. And I thought, well, if any of our internal monologues were made public, none of us would be very likable. I
wouldn't want to have a cup of tea with Stephen Dedalus.
That's probably quite revealing of my internal monologues, but basically, there's that sense of say the thing that people are afraid of saying, and I really wanted to do a kind of character study. I really wanted to think about the emotional truths that we keep. Actually, it reminds me a little bit, to use another spatial metaphor, of Adrienne, the way you've written about bunkers, right? And writing on bunkers, and the way that actually writing is about both of those things. It's about laying ourselves open and vulnerable, but also trying to create an edifice around it, right? That will keep the writing safe, or keep us safe, or keep the characters safe, or whatever. And just really thinking that's quite an abstract way of talking about writing fiction. I mean, the literal answer is I sat down and I was trying to do another nonfiction project and it wasn't happening. And these other characters kept appearing, and I kept going, no, I'm not meant to be doing you. And in the end, I wasn't happy with the nonfiction project. And my mother, of all people, said, just do the other thing. And I'm not, that is her voice.
Yeah.
And I was like, it sounds so easy for you to say. And she goes, yeah, but it's easy. Sometimes the thing that's easy to say is easy to do. You just have to do it. So, yeah.
Would you be willing to read a page or so?
Yeah.
If I give you a copy, or
I love that.
You could read whichever. But
no, I read a tiny bit from Ruth and Penn. It's a new one.
Yeah.
Look, you have a signed edition.
Wow.
Finish that. Okay,
I got to meet the author.
I will read right from the start. This is the perspectives alternate. So this is Ruth. Here she is. Ruth wakes with a full bladder, still half in a dream of being somewhere else. Where was it she had been? But no, work out where this is. Monday morning, home, with the other side of the bed empty. In the bathroom, she flicks on the light, sits to pee, and automatically checks her underwear. No blood. Silent thanks. She will report this at the hospital later. All fine, only a checkup. It's not so easy to quell the fear, though. Maybe she should go back to bed for a few last moments. It's still early enough. But she has that sticky after feeling of a feverish night. May as well shower. She dips down to make sure the plug is out, and there is a rush of dizziness, a clouding. Is this what you want? He had asked last night, almost as they were hanging up. And Ruth had thought, what if I tell the truth? Perhaps, though, he wasn't really asking. Perhaps he didn't want to know the answer. She cannot now even remember his intonation. Is this what you want? Was it a question or an accusation? The pipes make that little groaning noise before the water starts, a recriminating pause. Ruth steps under the water, feels the first flush of heat on her skin, but the question will not leave her. Perhaps she should turn the shower off, get out, undo it all, phone Aidan back. She imagines herself asking him, "What did you mean when you said the thing about wanting?" But he is probably still asleep. He can sleep through anything, noise, emotional turmoil, you name it. He has slept, is sleeping through it. It is one more fact in her case against him that he is a good sleeper.
That's such a great line.
It's great. Also, as an insomniac at that point.
Yeah. It's such a great line, though.
I wanted to just follow up on this and say that one of the things I really appreciate is just the demands that different genres or writing projects are making of you, it sounds like. I think that, I did an MFA and then I did my PhD in literature and creative writing. And sometimes I don't know if this arises here at Villanova, but everywhere I've been a student, there was are you fiction, are you poetry? Occasionally, are you fiction, are you poetry, are you nonfiction? And I really seized up whenever anyone would ask me that question, because it felt like folks were saying, well, this is the thing you want to be expert in, or you need to already claim a sense of expertise. It took all the fun and play out of things, and it really felt territorial. And one of the things I think that happens for us as writers is that different projects arise in the form of nonfiction, scholarly work, a play, that, there may be people who feel very drawn to just work in one particular genre, but many of the writers I know and admire move up. It's very, there's a lot of hybridity and cross-pollination.
Yeah.
I think we get scared out of certain genres.
So. Yeah.
Right? That, or we don't fly at it at the very outset, and then we get tentative.
So I'm not, going to write a good poem. Well, what does that even mean? Are you trying to figure something out? Are you asking a question? And I will say that I started writing nonfiction in the middle of my PhD program, and nonfiction made me a much better prose writer in general. I think that as a fiction writer, I came at things just so much style first, and would kind of get lost in terms of the stories that I wanted to tell. And nonfiction, just also because it articulated for me my responsibilities to other people, to real people, places, and things, even if they would never read what I wrote, that it just made me, I think it was a good kind of practice. And I find it really satisfying and nice to not feel as though I have to do one thing or another. And it's great to work at a place where people appreciate folks doing all different kinds of work.
What do you think, Charlotte? Do you declare a specialty?
Yeah, I mean, maybe we're a little biased because we're all like liberal artsy here, right? Yeah. But I definitely have always been a little bit resistant to this idea of boxes, and it kind of ties into something that I was wondering if you had any insight on, which is how your background in drama has affected your creative writing. Because I mean, I'm taking my first creative writing class now, and I feel like it's so hard to get the dialogue right and the timing, and that's with all the story and narration to kind of like disguise it. So I don't know, I was just wondering kind of what your experience with drama and studying drama and writing about drama, how that has kind of influenced the work that you're doing now.
It is. One of the reasons it's a great question is it's really hard to answer.
Sorry.
Because I think actually it might, that kind of, on the level of style, I think that might be a different person would have perspective on it that I just wouldn't, to make those connections. I think of it in two ways. So I never did any creative writing classes, right? So I think, which is both an advantage and a disadvantage at times. The advantage is the kind of freedom, I think, that you're talking about, Adrienne. And I think of naivety as like a superpower. It's like, now I know what I have to do. It's much harder. One of the things that I love, my partner often says about plays, that they're like short stories, but with all the hard bits taken out because it's just dialogue. One of the things that I love about drama is just how direct it is, but also how much it forces you, if you're reading a script, to imagine, and the space in it. And I really like prose that's also spacious, right? I literally like books that have a lot of blank space on the page, So poetry should be good for me, but some poems seem hard sometimes. Speaking of genres,
they are hard. They are hard.
Yes. The other thing that having a history of drama has given me was that I was trained to do play reports. So we would go to the theatre and then have to describe what happened. And between that and then a weird thing of living in a different country from my family and my friends for 4 years when I was a teenager, and I had to write letters all of the time. It's like in the early 1990s, so it's way before the internet. And both of those things have given me a practice of writing about events happening. And if there is a thing that I am good at, it is that. And any time that I read over things that I've written, where it is good or where it is strong is where it's just describing things, which I totally took for granted. And it's interesting to hear you use the word style, Adrienne, because like I always assumed I couldn't write because I didn't have a style, by which I mean I didn't have a high literary style. And then when I was showing work to the publishers and they said, oh, we really like your style. And I said, well, I don't have a style. And that's just how it sounds in my head. And they said, that is a style. And I was like, it took me to 40 to figure that out. So I'm saying it now so that it doesn't take other people to 40.
So your new essay collection.
Well, it seems a bit grand to talk about something that's very much
so your new
imagined,
your new imaginings, your new jottings, your new writings, scribblings. I don't know. I'm sure they're much further advanced than that. The is it a new departure? Is it continuation? Is it?
It feels like both. One of the
just
questions,
to give our audience a teaser of what's to come.
So I have spent the last 20 years teaching theatre, and I often teach plays that are about difficult things. I mean, I was talking about this with a friend the other day who is also a theatre teacher, and we were talking about how we've spent most of our careers teaching plays in which women get treated violently. And she said, I mean, it really shouldn't be a surprise that that this had happened to us, right? Like, there's lots of ways of telling your story. It doesn't just have to be in a memoir form, right? We do it through our actions all of the time. Sure. And so the new collection is about I want to write about the practice of being a teacher and how I bring myself to the work that I teach, and also what I would love for the students to get out of it, right? How do they get that kind of critical distance, right? So that they can be the work can be a mirror for them, but also a window and also a sliding door. I'm going to steal that now.
Please do. I trot it out all the time.
That's just that idea of like, you know, what are the skills we're really trying to give students through? I teach in an English department. Like, what are the skills we're really trying to give students to navigate the world through? It's not that, oh, please, let's be an expert in reading the plays of X playwright. It's like, okay, how do we respond to these kinds of emotions happening in front of us, right? And how do we keep ourselves safe? And actually, how do we have a practice of joy as well? So yeah, I'm trying to bring those two worlds together. And
wonderful.
Yeah.
I didn't mean to cut you
Fingers
off.
crossed. No. But I mean, I could just. I'm still a little bit feral on it.
Yeah, fair enough. Fair enough.
Talk for hours.
Well, thank you very much for being here with us today, and thank you,
Thank you,
Charlotte, and thank you, Adrienne.
Amazing,
pleasure.
Privilege.
So it's great to have you here, and thanks for everybody for coming out.
Thank you. Thanks for listening.